Right, so we're looking at Gilliland's car. We want to kind of look at how to make sure that we um, see that these patterns, these halftone gradient effects, how they're kind of weirdly stretched and smashed and moved. And the easiest way to replicate this would be to use the warp brush. So I'm going to pull this over to my other screen so I can look at it as I make a similar texture here. I'm not making the car. Just doing this as a tutorial to how to do this kind of thing. Um, I'm not going to make it unless someone asks me to, um, unless I'm asked for the help. So what I did is I got a brush and I got the hardness set around half, forces set really low so that it makes this kind of like shaded effect. So if I do this, I'm probably just going to go 1, 2, 3 clicks, something like that to get a little bit darker, but not crazy. You could also do a second one where you're like, just click and drag and see what happens. But in this case, you want a white background, you want a black or gray, color to do the soft paintbrush, airbrush effect type of thing. And then you're going to use filters. So you go to filters, distorts, newsprint, and it brings up this, and it comes up and you can see black on white, and if the pattern is line and it made lines. If you change the pattern to circles, it'll make the dots, and you can increase or decrease the period there. I'm gonna go, I don't know, something like this looks about good for me. This bottom one's kind of useless. I'm not really going to use that then. But based on the size, you can make it darker in the middle or lighter in the middle. And that'll affect how dense or how large those dots end up for the halftone gradient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go colors, color to alpha to get rid of the background. And it automatically pulls out white. So if you go white on or black on white, that'll do that. I just mess with this in case I want to keep some of the outside, if I lose it entirely. This one seems fine. Like if you go that, it goes to hard gradient. So this looks fine. It should be, if I was to recolor this and make it red, say, I'm just gonna do this just for kicks and giggles here. I color it, yeah. So it's got the transparency in it, so you can see it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get rid of what's down here because we don't need that. All right. So what you use is the warp brush, and a lot of people don't use the warp brush because they're like, oh, just use smudge. But smudge and warp are two totally different things. Warp will keep the shapes, the individual shapes. If I was to come in here and go with the smudge brush, it smears and nothing's left. The difference between smudge and warp is warp will retain the shapes, and I can drag it out and it'll distort, right? And I've got my strength and my hardness real low. I got a real big brush on it, so I can drag it out, 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 as much as I want. I can make this really wide, or I can make this super narrow, things like that. I'm gonna undo those last two just because I want it to be relatively across. That way, if I want to use this pattern and it left it, I can just place this into the car. And what I would probably do would be Control F, just flip it and look at how this comes out on the fender. It's really stretched here, and it also kind of bends. So what are we going to do? How do you emulate that? Take that same brush and push straight through. That way the whole thing bends back, bends back, bends back. And I'm going to come a little bit higher to force it to follow that shape. And I'm going to come through on the bottom and the top again to pull it forward. And as soon as you click off, it renders it a little bit better. So here we're at. It tails off, kind of goes up, 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 and tails forward. So the top has to be a little bit more. I could also sit here and just rotate to make it, to give it that straight across effect here. And then I can, again, work with the top. And I could make it a little bit more strong by sizing this down. That way it's going to have more focused pressure, and I can pull everything forward. But for the most part, that's all you need to do in order to do these. This worked really, really, really well for, let me pull up JSQ really quick. The first phase, scheme last year. That was one of the Gilliland cars last year. If I can figure out how to work J scheme. Nice. 2022, the 38 car. It was the one that he ran at Daytona for sure. Let's see. Here, this one. With the texture over the back. That was a good one to pull until it made that shape, and then I was able to just line it up over the gaps. But that's all you need to do in order to use the warp brush. The warp brush is really good for fine tuning things. If you have something that's just a pixel off, but you don't want to move it on the side, if you don't want to move the design on the side, you can just push something a little bit. And it's going to be just really based on the size. So if I go small, it's going to be really focused, and it's going to drag just that part, but it might distort up here. Oh, I hit cut. And if I did that, it would just affect like one little bit of it. But if you want to, just pull gradually across a lot of it, use a bigger brush. Right? But warp is arguably one of my most used. It's really good for template making if you're trying to get things to wrap the right way on a fender. Fixing other people's templates when they post something and it's just kind of wonky and droopy, and when the front ends look sad and depressed, you can kind of make them more happy and drag them up. But that's what I use the warp brush for. So hopefully that helps. Let's see what happens. Good luck. Happy painting.